All right, everyone, let's get started. My name is Alex, and you are on the Classic Cars Roast channel. Some people are shelling out a fortune for this machine, so let's investigate if it's pure genius or just madness. 1957 Dodge Coronet. Now, here's the kicker. This wasn't just any car. This was Chrysler's attempt to ride the wave of the forward look, and what a ride it turned out to be. But before you start drooling over those sweeping fins and that so-called unique design, let's get real about what lurks beneath the surface of this classic. First off, the market for these cars is nuts. Seriously, I've seen restored models, particularly those D500 variants, fetch anywhere from $50,000 to over $100,000 at auctions. And what makes it worse? It's usually for cars with absurdly low mileage, like just 97 miles or around 3,900 miles. Talk about a premium for a glorified paperweight. This is what I call a brutal charm premium. What used to be a car that could be bought and thrown away is now a trophy for collectors. I mean, who wouldn't want a piece of heavy iron that was once driven by someone who probably didn't care about it at all? But let's not forget the build quality, which is pretty dreadful to say the least. The rust spots? They're practically an invitation on lower body panels, especially around those quarter panels and rear wheel arches. And don't get me started on the electrical system. You'd think they were trying to wire a carnival with how unreliable those power features are. If you're looking to buy one of these, you better be prepared for some serious restoration work. Now, the engine options. Let's talk about that, since the engine is where the real problems begin. The Super Red Ram V8 has a displacement of 325 cubic inches, pushing out a pathetic 190 horsepower SAE net. Seriously, is this a car or a lawnmower? You could practically hear the engine wheezing as it tries to move that heavy chassis. And if you're thinking of the D500 with its two quad carburetors, you might get a slightly better performance. But don't let that fool you. It's still a drop in the bucket compared to what real muscle cars were offering back in the day. So, is this car worth your hard-earned cash? The answer is a resounding maybe. If you can find one in decent shape with originality intact, remember it's only original once, you might have something worth holding on to. But if you spot a repainted body or shoddy electrical work, game over, my friend. You'll be better off lighting your money on fire than investing in that kind of disaster. All right, folks, let's dive into the creation story of the 1957 Dodge Coronet, and I assure you, it's as fascinating as it is flawed. This car emerged in a time when the automotive landscape was shifting dramatically, and honestly, not for the better. The Coronet was born from Chrysler's ambitious forward-look design, crafted by the brilliant Virgil Exner. Now, don't get me wrong, that sweeping fin design and low body profile was bold and fresh, but it was also a sign of the times, an era that was about to take a nosedive into what we now call the malaise era. Picture this. The mid-50s were a golden age for American muscle, with high-compression V8 engines roaring to life and power figures that could make your heart race. The Coronet was initially introduced as a full-size car, and it came with some impressive options, including the Super Red Ram V8 engine, boasting a whopping 245 gross horsepower. But I must stress the word gross here. That's a metric designed to make the numbers sound better than they are, because the net horsepower is where the truth lies, and it's a pathetic 190 at best. It's like a boxer who talks a big game but can't throw a punch. The introduction of the D500 V8 option was a desperate attempt to keep pace with the muscle car craze, cranking out a slightly more respectable 285 gross horsepower. But let's be honest, that's still a far cry from the powerhouses of earlier years. Back then, cars like this could actually haul ass, but by the time the Coronet hit the road, it was already starting to feel the squeeze of new emissions regulations and fuel economy standards. And then there are those transmission options. Sure, the 3-speed torque flight automatic was a step up, but have you ever driven a 2-speed power flight? It's like trying to sprint in quicksand. As we progressed into the malaise era, the handling of these cars went from impressive to downright dreadful, with many manufacturers cutting corners on build quality that would make you weep. Rust spots and electrical issues became the norm. But that's not the only thing that's offensive. The Coronet's market position was equally bewildering. With the big iron market heating up, This once mighty beast is now often slapped with auction prices that defy logic, over $100,000 for a car that didn't even have the guts to keep up with its predecessors. In the grand scheme of things, the 1957 Dodge Coronet represents a turning point in automotive history, a car that tried to assert itself in an era of decline while symbolizing the very compromises that would ultimately lead to the downfall of American muscle. What about that doesn't make you cringe? All right, buckle up because the exterior of the 1957 Dodge Coronet is where this car really tries to shine, but it's not without its share of issues. First off, the colors. Let's talk about that palette. It offered shades like glacier white and the utterly ridiculous canyon coral. I mean, who thought that was a good idea? Sure, some of these colors can turn heads, but they can also scream, "Look at me, I'm desperately trying to stand out." The garnet red and copper glow might catch your eye, but they can't distract from the fact that this car's overall design is just a mixed bag of flashy and tacky. Moving on to the body lines, you'll notice the unique forward look styling by Virgil Exner. The sweeping fins are a hallmark of the era, but they feel more like a desperate attempt to be relevant than a masterstroke of design. The lower body profile does give it some presence, but let's be real, it's not going to age like fine wine. The dual headlight setup introduced mid-year does add a touch of aggression, but honestly, it feels like a half-hearted effort. Now let's dive into that grille. This car features a wider, larger mesh with vertical bars, and while it tries to create a bold statement, it falls flat. Is it a grille or a giant mouth gasping for attention? You decide. And don't even get me started on the bumpers. They're chrome, sure, but they're also a bit too shiny, almost like the designers said, "Let's just throw some bling on it and hope for the best." Now, if we're talking about build quality, prepare for disappointment. The rust issues are well documented, especially around the lower body panels. You'll often find these cars with rust spots that creep up like an unwanted guest, trunk floors, quarter panels, and rear wheel arches all falling victim. It's like the car is slowly rotting away under that flashy exterior. So what do you think? Does the exterior make you want to jump in and take it for a spin? Or is it just another case of style over substance? The visuals might be striking, but for me, a beautiful facade can't mask the underlying flaws. Would I buy this car? Well, if I found one that had been meticulously maintained, maybe, but with the rust issues and questionable styling choices, it would take a lot of convincing. So, here we are, staring at the interior of the 1957 Dodge Coronet, and honestly, it's a mixed bag of emotions. First off, what do you think when you step inside? The dashboard layout is a simple, symmetrical design featuring those circular gauges that seem to scream, "We didn't really try that hard." The central speedometer is an absolute classic, but it's not exactly groundbreaking, is it? You'd think a car from this era would have something a bit more exciting to offer. Instead, it feels like they took a page from the playbook of mediocrity. And speaking of comfort, you better be prepared to embrace the bench seats that come standard. If you're looking for plush luxury, you might want to look elsewhere because the premium trims barely wrap you in anything worth writing home about. It's like sitting on a park bench that just happens to be in a car. You'll be longing for some real cushiness after a long drive, and don't even get me started on the smell. You know that distinct mix of old vinyl and questionable cleaning products? Yeah, that's what you'll be inhaling. It's charming in its own right, but it's also a reminder that this car is decades old and perhaps not the best for long trips unless you want to lose your sanity. Now, turn your attention to the options. Higher trims include some two-tone color schemes and padded dashes, which at least tries to add a bit of flair to the otherwise bland interior. But let's be real here. The push-button controls for the automatic transmission models, dubbed the Magic Button Drive, feel like a novelty that's more annoying than useful. You'll be fumbling around trying to figure out which button does what while you're stuck in traffic. For me, a poorly designed control layout is an immediate red flag, and it's hard not to roll my eyes at this so-called innovation. Now, let's not forget the notorious wiring issues. If you're considering buying one of these beauties, you might want to pack some extra patience for electrical gremlins lurking in the shadows, especially if you opt for the power features. It's like Dodge decided they were going to skimp on quality just when they had the chance to shine. And honestly, it's embarrassing for a car with such a storied legacy. Despite all of these flaws, the interior of the 1957 Dodge Coronet has an unmistakable character. It's got a certain brutal charm that appeals to those of us who appreciate the raw, unapologetic nature of classic cars. But for me, I'd need to find one in really good condition. Originality is key, after all, before I even think about putting my money down. Would you be tempted by this vintage ride, or would you rather keep your distance? All right, gearheads, it's time to get our hands dirty and dive deep into the heart of the beast, the engine of the 1957 Dodge Coronet. Now, when you think of classic muscle, you might expect something that roars with power, but let me tell you, we're not quite in that territory here. The engine options for the Coronet were, at best, a mixed bag of disappointment and a glimmer of hope. First up, we've got the Super Red Ram V8, a name that should evoke visions of speed and power, but instead delivers a rather pathetic 190 horsepower when we talk about it in SAE net terms. That 7.6-to-1 compression ratio? Yikes. You'll be hard-pressed to feel the thrill of acceleration with that kind of power. Sure, it has 325 cubic inches of displacement, which on paper sounds all right, but the torque? A mere 345 pound-feet. You can almost hear the engine wheezing as it struggles to push this hefty classic down the road. Now, for those of you who want a bit more oomph, there's the D500 V8. This engine can crank out 285 horsepower gross, and with dual quad carburetors, it can reach 310 horsepower. Now we're talking. But don't get too excited. This is still a far cry from the muscle we had in the glory days, like the high-compression V8s of 1970, which were nothing short of phenomenal. The torque? Slightly better at 350 pound-feet, but it still feels like it's dragging a weight behind it. What's even more infuriating is the transmission options. You've got a 3-speed manual, a 2-speed PowerFlight automatic, and the much-lauded 3-speed TorqueFlite automatic, the best automatic transmission ever built. But why would you want to pair that beauty with a mediocre engine? It's like putting a diamond necklace on a pig. The PowerFlight? Let's just say it's notorious for leaks and engagement issues. And don't even get me started on the performance numbers. A 0 to 60 miles per hour time of approximately 9.3 seconds with the top D500 engine. That's more akin to a leisurely Sunday drive than a thrilling ride. The quarter-mile times hover in the low to mid-16-second range for the higher performance models, which is just pathetic by today's standards. So, if you're thinking about the engine as a selling point for the 1957 Dodge Coronet, you might want to check your expectations at the door. It's a classic that tries to wear the crown of muscle but falls short in the horsepower department. Would I buy one? Only if it came with a better engine swap. All right, folks. Buckle up because we're diving into the heart of the beast. The transmission and rear axle of the 1957 Dodge Coronet. Now, if there's one thing that drives me absolutely bonkers about this car, it's the transmission options they decided to give us. The Dodge Coronet came with a 3-speed manual, a 2-speed PowerFlight automatic, and a 3-speed TorqueFlite automatic, which marked the first year for the latter. But let's just say, the PowerFlight is definitely not winning any awards here. I mean, 2 speeds? Seriously? It's like they were still living in the Stone Age when everyone else was moving on to better things. You might as well be driving a tractor with that thing. This is the era of muscle, and we're stuck with a 2-speed slush box that can barely keep up with a toddler on a tricycle. Now, the TorqueFlite, on the other hand, is a different story. It's the best automatic transmission ever built, period. It's smooth, it's reliable, and it's what you want in a classic car. The kind of transmission that can handle the raw power of the engine without turning into a whining mess. But let's face it, not everyone was lucky enough to snag the TorqueFlite, which means many owners were left to deal with that pathetic PowerFlight. I can't stress enough how disappointing that is. For me, a car's transmission is sacred ground, and if it doesn't deliver, it's an immediate disqualifier. I'd rather walk than deal with that nonsense. Then we have the rear axle. The common ratios were 3.54 to 1 and 3.73 to 1, which isn't terrible on paper, but let's be real. The handling dynamics and overall performance suffer greatly. If you think you can whip this car around a corner and expect it to stick like glue, you're in for a rude awakening. It used to be better back in the day when cars had that raw, planted feel on the road. Now you'll find yourself wrestling with a car that feels more like a loose cannon than a finely tuned machine. And let's not even start on the mechanical flaws. Rust issues are rampant, and those wiring problems with the electrical features? Forget it. You'll be spending more time tinkering under the hood than actually enjoying a drive. This is not what you want in a classic car. So, when it comes to the mechanics of the 1957 Dodge Coronet, I can't help but feel let down. If you're going to put your money down for a classic, it better have the guts to back it up. Would I buy one? Only if it had that torque flight and I could guarantee it was in good shape. Otherwise, I'd pass on this one and look for something that knows how to drive right. When it comes to the suspension and brakes of the 1957 Dodge Coronet, hold on to your hats because it's a real roller coaster of disappointment. Dodge claimed to be pioneering the forward look, but when you dig deeper, you realize they were just pushing out a half-baked product. The front suspension is a conventional setup with upper and lower control arms. But who are we kidding? This is hardly cutting-edge engineering. You might as well be piloting a boat in rough seas because the handling on this thing is about as precise as a drunken sailor. Now, let's talk about the rear. The leaf spring arrangement might have been the norm back in the day, but in the context of the malaise era, this setup feels like it belongs in a museum rather than on the road. The ride quality? It's a little too soft, which translates into a wallowy experience that'll make you question your life choices every time you hit a corner. You could be cruising down the highway with all the confidence of a king, only to be thrown into the next lane when you hit a bump. Not exactly the forward look you'd expect, right? And then we have the brakes. The Coronet comes with drum brakes all around. Yes, drum brakes. In a time when disc brakes were becoming the standard for performance and safety, Dodge decided to stick with a vintage technology that could barely stop a shopping cart, let alone this hefty piece of iron. The stopping power is laughable at best, and you'll be praying to the automotive gods every time you need to slam those brakes. My biggest issue has always been the brakes. They simply don't inspire any confidence. What's particularly frustrating is that this car had the potential to be something special, something that could have carved its name into the annals of American muscle. But instead, you get a car that feels like it's come straight out of a time capsule, a time when mediocrity was acceptable. You know, back when cars were still built with charm but devoid of the engineering prowess we expect today. So, if you're thinking about taking a plunge and buying a Coronet, just remember that the suspension and brakes are deal breakers for me. If it's not handling well and can't stop on a dime, what's the point? You're better off looking elsewhere, unless you're just in it for the brutal charm and not the performance. When it comes to the reliability of the 1957 Dodge Coronet, the truth is far from pretty. This car is notorious for rust issues, particularly around those lower body panels, rear wheel arches, and the trunk floor. If you're considering one of these beauties, look closely. If you see rust spots, just walk away. For me, that's an immediate game over. The electrical system is another headache, plagued with wiring issues that can leave you stranded faster than you can say power flight. And speaking of that transmission, while the Turbo Hydromatic 400 is the gold standard, the two-speed power flight that came stock in many Coronets is just not up to snuff. If you want reliability, you're going to have to look elsewhere. The build quality? Let's not even go there. Anyone who thinks this car represents peak engineering is living in a fantasy world. Comically thick door seals are just a feeble cover-up for those cringe-worthy panel gaps. You might think you're getting a piece of automotive history, but what you're really getting is a reminder of how far we've come, and how quickly things can go south when manufacturers cut corners. So, is the Dodge Coronet worth it? As a piece of nostalgia? Absolutely. It has that brutal charm and unapologetic character that can make any car enthusiast weak at the knees. But if you're looking for something reliable, keep scrolling because this car is a ticking time bomb of mechanical issues waiting to happen. The market for these big iron classics is heating up, and prices are climbing into the stratosphere. Good luck finding one under $50,000 if it's in decent shape. But here's the kicker. If you stumble upon one of these cars that has been meticulously cared for with low mileage and no rust, you might just have a winner. In that case, despite all its flaws, if you find one at a reasonable price, buy it. So, I have to ask you, would you spend your money on this? If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give it a like. Leave your comments and impressions. Your opinion is very important to me. Until next time.